Fine. Hey guys, it's me, Urzaban, and welcome to the Halo Wars 2 review. Now, if I kind of sound like crap in this audio, I apologize. I'm still currently sick. I'm almost over it, and I really wanted to get this audio done, so I kind of forced myself up out of bed to actually get it done. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about Halo Wars 2. So Halo Wars 2 was a semi-anticipated game by me, mainly due to the fact that I need a reason to turn on my Dustbox 1 and actually justify the $195 I spent on this second console. So let's go ahead and see if Halo Wars 2 lives up to any real expectation now that's the biggest exclusive for the Xbox One this year. Wow, that's really sad that Halo Wars 2 is the biggest exclusive for the Xbox One this year. And you can't even really use the term exclusive if you count the whole Windows Store bullshit, so I guess let's go ahead and get right into the review. Okay, so to kick off the review, let me talk about the game's visual, sound, and technical aspects of the game to make sure those are all up to standards and don't have any real issues. Now, keep in mind I did play this on the Xbox One and not the PC, so I can only speak for that version, therefore I can't get super detailed about frame rates and stuff like that because there isn't really a good way to measure that on console. So moving forward, Halo Wars 2 visually, I like it a lot. It has a nice mixture of both the new and older art style from Halo, so it does fit very well. It makes like this unique star child of both art styles of the game, which I do like a lot. It's a lot better than having just the newer art style, in my opinion. That shit looked like trash in Halo 5. Anyway, moving forward. So visually the game looks good. It's got a lot of high contrasting colors that do paint the environment very well, and all of the character models do look really good. Moving forward from that, we also have the sound design. The game sound effects all fit very well, have the appropriate punch, and all sound like the different units and vehicles that you're operating out in the field. So that coupled with the game's solid voice acting and great sound score that plays with the game in the missions and multiplayer fits very well. On top of that, we have the game's technical aspects. Now, did I have any real major technical issues of major frame rate skipping, hard crashes, freezing up, or anything major like that? Not really. I, matter of fact, only had one major glitch my whole playthrough of Halo Wars 2, which was this one cutscene where every time I came to it, there would be this one spot where it would skip and freeze for 5 to 10 seconds straight every time I got to that one part, even after I patched it, so that one cutscene did have a problem. But other than that, there's no real productionary issues with Halo Wars 2, and it all comes in at a decent runtime for the single player, clocking in at roughly 9 hours. Which isn't the longest RTS game that I've played, but it's definitely not the shortest, and it is an overall solid length for this game. Okay, now before I move on to the single player and multiplayer sections of this review and the story section of this review, I do have one gripe about the gameplay that I couldn't figure out where else to fit, so I'm going to put it here before I go into better detail about the gameplay in single player and multiplayer, so that way I can talk about it more clearly. And that one major gripe that I have with the gameplay is the control and movement system of Halo Wars 2 being very clunky. Now I know this is going to suffer on a console RTS, especially considering RTSs are a computer genre and a console port can only do but so well in this category, but the simple fact of the matter is I can't really shake the fact that I've played RTSs that have handled movement and control way better, and the reason that I find it restrictive is you really only have 3 ways of picking your troops and sending them out to go do things, meaning you can either single select your troops, paintbrush select your troops, and all select troops, meaning you click on the entire stack with RB and send the entire stack, and it's really hard to be strategic because it makes it harder for you to set up scouting parties, set up artillery positions, or divide your troops into different battalions to do multi-layered attacks or come in from other angles and be strategic that way, simply due to the fact that when you paintbrush select, you end up clicking units that you don't want. When you single select, it takes too long, and then when you send all of your units, you leave yourself exposed. So the movement system is just very clunky overall, and that's the biggest problem that I have with it. And while it's not the worst movement system in the world, it definitely is a step below other RTSs that I've played like XCOM, Enemy Unknown, Hearts of Iron, and Civilization. Okay, so moving on to the single player of Halo Wars 2, how do I feel about the single player of Halo Wars 2? I'd say overall I do like it, but there are a couple things that I do need to critique it for. But overall, I do like the single player. It does a good job of connecting to the story. The gameplay sections actually do feel like you're contributing to what's happening in the overall story. The mission structure is very varied, meaning that some missions will be classic domination, other missions will be search and rescue, other ones will basically be fighting over resources and capture points. So it was definitely varied as it went throughout the campaign. Moving forward from that, the campaign also does a good job of teaching you the game controls, what the different facilities are and what the different units are, and how to basically play through the game with all of the basic systems. So it does a good job of teaching you the game and its controls. Now, what doesn't the campaign do well? Well, I feel that the campaign in large part is way too easy on normal mode. Like, I was able to finish every mission just by building a giant troop cluster and sending said giant cluster to go kill and not even having to think about it, and I was able to get through around 97% of all of the missions with no real issue. There was only around 2 missions that required any real thought from me, and one that had artificial difficulty from it fast spawning units, but beyond that, the giant troop cluster got the job done. I was able to just plow through everything, and I got gold or silver medal every mission except for one mission just by sending a giant troop cluster, so I found it way too easy. Then on top of that, with the campaign being way too easy, it doesn't do a good job of preparing you for the multiplayer at all, simply due to the fact that it makes you think, oh, if I have a giant troop cluster, I can destroy everything. No, if you take that mentality to the multiplayer, you will die. You will legitimately die and get wrecked every game if you think you can win a multiplayer match by doing that, because the matches actually require thought and strategy, but the campaign doesn't do a good job of teaching that to you, unfortunately. So those are my 2 biggest gripes to the campaign. Otherwise, I like it a lot. Okay, so the natural junction to go to after single player is the multiplayer. So in terms of the multiplayer, we got a good bit to talk about. Now, fair warning here, I can't really be at liberty to talk about the co-op of the multiplayer simply due to the fact that none of my friends bought the game. I wasn't willing to go out and yell at them to go get the game so they can help me record a section for review, though I am glad that co-op is a part of the game. I do consider it positive. I can't unfortunately add it to the review or take it into any real consideration on what I'm talking about here, so consider co-op omitted because I have no real time logged on it and I can't say how well it works or if it's even a good system or not, so that's a fair disclaimer before I talk about the multiplayer. Moving forward from that, the multiplayer is split into 2 sections, the basic multiplayer playlist and the Blitz playlist. Let's talk about the Blitz playlist first. Okay, so I'm gonna spend more time on Blitz simply because it's the newest thing to the multiplayer, and I find what ended up happening to it to be very tragic, with it being my favorite addition to the game. So let's go ahead and talk about Blitz, why I find it unique and why it's my favorite addition to the game, and why it's tragic that it's almost completely ruined by this one toxic thing known as microtransactions. Anyway, let's go ahead and move forward with Blitz as an overall game type and playlist. Blitz is this unique playlist and game type area where you have this combination of an RTS and a trading card game, where it has traditional RTS gameplay where you fight over different capture points and other things like that, but your spawns are very dependent upon the energy you have available and the cards in your hand and the cards in your deck. Now, I like this because it actually requires on-your-feet strategy by building your own custom deck and making the best deck possible and opening up card packs to build the greatest deck. And I like this a lot because while you could power up cards and make newer cards, the strategy came from you. You had to think on your feet and weigh the risk and the reward of every strategy. Do you spawn this super rainbow-rific unit that could clear the field but be gone quickly but kill all of your energy? Do you spawn a whole bunch of smaller units to have a bigger ground presence but not be as effective in the field? Do you do any other strategy that would require certain parameters? It really made you think about how you were going to go about each strategy, and I like that a lot. And the simple fact of the matter is that it felt like Yu-Gi-Oh! Had been fused with one of my favorite RTS games, simply due to the fact that opening up card packs, building my own custom deck felt great, it felt unique, it felt personal to me, and winning a game with a deck I built felt amazing. So in the end, it's kind of sad that it's almost ruined by the Blitz pack microtransactions. And now, let's go ahead and talk about the Blitz Pack microtransactions. I find the Blitz Pack microtransactions to be the worst, simply due to the fact that if you get Blitz Packs, your duplicate cards are immediately powered up, and then on top of that, you get a way bigger pool of cards, meaning that if you're willing to dump more money into the game than I am, you already have a paid-for advantage over me, which I really don't like. That's basically saying screw the progression and challenge system to get more packs, I'm just gonna cheat the system by dumping my wallet into it. And the worst part out of this is the best value microtransaction is $100, the best seller is $20, and the game was already $60 at release. Meaning if you buy the game at release and then buy the best value microtransaction, you're already into the game $160, and you have a paid for advantage over people like me who could only afford to buy the game, which I really hate. It's almost pay to win. It's not quite pay to win because you still have to win the game yourself, and it doesn't guarantee you the best deck, but it definitely gives you a better chance of having better cards than me. And I hate a system where it basically favors whoever has the bigger wallet. It makes the game feel completely unfair and not worth playing, and almost ruins the game type for me. And that's ultimately the biggest problem with Blitz, and I find it sad because I love this game type, and it's ultimately almost ruined by these microtransactions. So if you get Halo Wars 2, I recommend you play Blitz, but be very leery of these microtransactions. Anyway, let's go ahead and talk about the rest of the multiplayer. Okay, now moving into the rest of the multiplayer, overall I do still like the multiplayer a lot, now that I've got my whole microtransaction spiel over with, but the multiplayer playlist is still basically built up of the same AI skirmishes where you can practice with AI enemies, Team War, Rumble, Headquarters, and other game types like that. It's pretty much same game types from Halo Wars 1, but they're still just as good as they were in Halo Wars 1, and I found the online multiplayer to be a lot of fun. My two favorite ones was Ranked Solo War and Team War 3-on-3. Those were my two favorite game types, and I did find myself playing quite a bit of Rumble. Overall, the multiplayer is fairly balanced. Again, if you're not very well weathered to it, it's gonna wreck you at first like it did with me, but if you stick with it, you get better, and it does have a fair bit of balance with each of the leaders equaling each other out and learning to play off of their weaknesses and strengths. So it definitely is a strong multiplayer, all things considered, with a decent amount of game types, leaders, and playlists. So overall, the multiplayer is pretty positive with the exception of the Blitz microtransactions. Okay, so here we are at the last section of the review, the story. Now, how is the story for Halo Wars 2? I find the story to be in large part just average. It's not really good, it's not really bad. It really doesn't have any memorable moments, nor does it have any real cringy moments. It just exists in this gray zone of existence. So let's go ahead and sum up the campaign's plot. So, the story of Halo Wars 2 picks up roughly 28 years after the events of the first game, being that Captain Cutter and his team aboard the Spirit of Fire wake up at the edge of the Ark that's been taken over by the Banished. That's an evil mercenary faction that's headed by the evil brute Atriox, who betrayed the Covenant and made his own private army known as the Banished. And you both gotta basically get on the Ark and fight each other for it. And then everything goes to hell as you both try to get this facility and the genocidal weapon within it. And that's the best paranoid hillbilly I can do, bruh. So I hope you enjoyed it. Anyway, the story is basically a very simple power struggle over these two factions to capture the Ark and the ring within it for their own reasons. So now, with the plot more or less summed up, let's go ahead and talk about what holds the campaign back from actually being good story-wise. So, the campaign story is held back by extremely bland characters, literally beyond Atriox. I didn't find myself actually really remembering much about any of the other characters, and the only reason that Atriox actually sticks with me is simply due to the fact that the game went out of its way to explain why he betrayed the Covenant and why he's doing what he's doing, so he's a villain with context. And I like that. So Atriox actually amused me a fair bit as a character, but Captain Cutters, Anders, Red Team, and Isabel feel extremely bland. And then on the banished end, besides Atriox, Decimus is your generic warlord, and then the mercenary leader is a mercenary leader who has nothing really going on other than leading mercenaries. So it put me in this really weird state of not rooting for either side, but more or less just playing as one side to see what would happen by the end of the campaign's runtime. So with everything taken into account, we can go ahead and move on to the factions. The factions are also pretty uneventful and uninteresting, simply due to the fact that they feel like cut and paste factions from Halo Wars 1. The UNNC is basically the same as it ever was. I didn't really expect any changes, but the Banished being this new secret faction, it's really disappointing because they're basically a de facto Covenant faction. If you really think about it. I know they're not really the Covenant, but they look like the Covenant, they fight like the Covenant, and then they act like the Covenant, and then they have similar motivations to the Covenant. So, if it looks like a dog, and it barks like a dog, then by golly, it's a dog. You know, kind of like how the Swarmed aren't technically the Locust, but they look and fight just like the Locust. It really doesn't do anything to differentiate itself in a meaningful way, so it may as well just be the Covenant with a new name slapped on it. So moving forward from that, those are the two big things that hold the campaign back, is that the characters are really uninteresting, and then the factions feel the same as they were in the first game. So it more or less feels like the story from Halo Wars 1 carried over, stopped for about 3 years, then started going again in the exact same fashion and had a super generic cliffhanger that everyone could see coming to bait for a Halo Wars 3 story-wise, which, if a Halo Wars 3 comes out, will I play it? Maybe, maybe not, we'll see. So let's go ahead and get into the final section of the review, the verdict. Okay, so here we are at the end of the review where I talk about everything with this game and see where it scores. So Halo Wars 2, does it work as a system seller exclusive and is a solid sequel to the first Halo Wars? In short terms, yes and no. Now here's the elongated answer. As a sequel to Halo Wars 1, I believe it's a good enough game to be called a proper sequel, and it does do the game enough justice to be a sequel. So it definitely does work as a sequel. Now, as a system seller exclusive, do I think Halo Wars 2 is a good system and platform to sell Xbox Ones and Windows 10? No, mainly due to the fact that the RTS genre is a niche genre to begin with, so you're not going to convince a whole bunch of people, and the first game really wasn't a system seller either, it was just a solid exclusive, and that's why I can recommend Halo Wars 2 as, because while it does have some major glaring issues of a lacking mobility system compared to other RTS games, a campaign that in large part is far too easy and doesn't do a good job of preparing you for the multiplayer, and overly invasive microtransactions and a very unique game type and playlist, it ultimately doesn't hold it back enough from being a solid experience, which is why I'm going to give Halo Wars 2 a 7 out of 10, mainly due to the fact that I really want a good exclusive to give me a reason to play the Xbox One every now and again, and Halo Wars 2 does that, but it's no system seller exclusive, and if you're thinking about playing it and you have the proper system and or software to do so, go for it. Though that being said, I feel like the multiplayer isn't going to last for too long, so just be aware of that. So that's my opinion on Halo Wars 2. Let me know your opinion down in the comments as far as if you agree with it or not, and I will see you bitches in the next video, and have a great day and an amazing life. Bitches.